At the legislature today, more legislation is required for the Boy Scouts of America to operate the adventure camp here. This time, it's a constitutional amendment that voters will decide. We'll explain in this half hour. And the governor's bill regarding teacher evaluations is on the move in the House. We'll talk about this bill and other education initiatives with the president of the West Virginia Education Association tonight on the Legislature Today. Good evening, I'm Beth Voorhees. Today, families of the 29 miners who died in the Upper Big Branch mine heard another report into the causes of the disaster. Officials with the State Office of Miners' Health, Safety, and Training told them what they had already heard from previous investigations. It was a volatile combination of methane gas and coal dust that caused a massive fireball in the mine. State officials blamed two foremen for failing to clean conveyor belts and apply rock dust. This news comes a day after the federal government charged the superintendent of the Upper Big Branch mine with conspiracy. 43-year-old Gary May is accused of alerting workers underground that inspectors were on site. Mine safety laws are being considered at this session of the legislature. Governor Tomlin's measure requiring drug testing for miners has been combined with Speaker Rick Thompson's more comprehensive bill, but the legislation is stalled. The mine safety bill has been on the House of Delegates' inactive calendar since early this week, stuck on second reading. Marion County Democrat and UMWA Vice President Mike Caputo is one of the people involved in ironing out the bill.
If we're going to pass a bill that does nothing, then I just soon do nothing. I think it's disrespectful for those families who are hearing that report today for the first time of the Upper Big Branch tragedy. If you look at the provisions that the House has recommended, it is recommendations that were recommended by all three reports: the independent report, the UMW report, and the federal report.
Caputo says one of the sticking points from the industry is a family's ability to bring in someone affiliated with a union to act as their representative in the event of a disaster.
The only thing we're saying is if your a loved one passes away in a mine fatality and you want someone like me to represent you, you should have that choice. But if you want someone like a representative of the Coal Association to represent you, then you should have that choice. Or if you want a minister, we don't want to limit that choice, and that's all it's about. I mean, they've made this a union versus a non-union issue, and that is not what it's about at all.
The House has until Wednesday to pass the bill. Caputo says he thinks negotiations will wrap up in a couple of days.
Nobody's posturing, at least I don't think anybody in the House is posturing to grandstand or do anything like that. It's out of respect to those 29 families to show that their loved ones did not die in vain. And I bet you if you...
The Upper Big Branch mine disaster is still being investigated by the FBI and the Inspector General of the U.S. Department of Labor. The House did pass 6 bills on third reading today. As Adam Cavalier reports, one of the bills passed fixes issues with an autism insurance coverage bill passed during last year's legislative session.
Finance Committee Chair Harry Keith White says House Bill 4260 makes behavioral therapy the treatment that insurers have to cover, which was the intent of the bill from the 2011 session.
The bill would also alter the cap of $30,000, which under current law applies to all treatments of autism spectrum disorder. The bill would apply the cap only to applied behavior analysis. Also, the Committee on Finance reported a committee substitute that restores the language relating to the monthly cap of $2,000 for applied behavior analysis as it was in the engrossed House Bill 2693 from the 2011 regular session.
The autism bill only had one question, and it came from Morgan County Republican Darrell Coles.
If we pass this bill this year, are we going to have to do a direct taxpayer subsidy, or has that been included in the PEIA premiums?
The PEIA last year, assuming the passage of the bill, had allocated $6 million in last year's PEIA budget. That money was restored back into the budget, and in anticipation of passage of this bill, PEI has looked at a $9 million contribution for their contribution for this bill.
That bill passed unanimously. The House also sent the West Virginia Religious Freedom Restoration Act on to the Senate. House Judiciary Chair Tim Miley says the bill clarifies that if West Virginia is going to infringe on a person's religious freedom, there must be a compelling state interest to do so.
If there is such compelling state interest, it needs to be done in the least restrictive means available. Just to clear up some concerns and questions I've received over the past few days, this does not affect the right of the state to compel immunizations of school children. The U.S. Supreme Court has determined that there is indeed a compelling state interest to require such immunizations, although we are one of only 2 states in the country that don't provide such religious exemption. I should also note that our state Supreme Court has held that there is a compelling state interest to require blood tests for marriage licenses, so there's no question that this will not in any way hurt the state's regulation of immunizations of school children.
The bill touched Berkeley County Republican Larry Kump, who is Mormon.
My surname is Austrian, but my mother's maiden name is Steinbach. The Steinbach family is German Jews. They would have dearly loved to have the religious protections of our constitutions. In another aspect, those of my adopted faith were driven out of many states in this country through across the frozen Mississippi River to the mountains in the west, which was part of the country of Mexico at the time. Their bloody trail left by the men, women, and children were testimony that, notwithstanding the constitutional protections of freedom of religion in our national constitution and various state constitutions, they still suffered grievous harm. So I think, on a very deep and personal level, codifying these freedoms further into law is a step in the right direction.
The bill passed 92-2. For West Virginia Public Broadcasting, I'm Adam Cavalier in Charleston.
Yet another major new aspect of the burgeoning National Boy Scout Adventure Camp came to light in the Senate Finance Committee today as a proposed constitutional amendment was approved. Bob Brunner has the story.
Boy Scout officials need to ask the state's voters to amend the Constitution so they may allow other groups to use a proposed 80,000-seat amphitheater for outside events. At issue is the tax-exempt status of the Boy Scouts. The Finance Committee unanimously approved the measure, which now moves to the Senate floor. Raleigh County Senator Mike Green says this could be an enormous boost for the state.
It will open the way for to make sure that any organization affiliated with the Boy Scouts of America, they can hold events there and not jeopardize the tax exempt status of the Boy Scouts of America.
So we're looking at maybe big concerts.
It could be. I mean, the sky's the limit. As he explained, there's an amphitheater-style setting that could seat up to 80,000 people. Obviously, as he mentioned, there's a large corporate sponsor that's not been named at this point that's going to be involved in this. So if we can get this on the ballot and get the people of West Virginia to support this constitutional amendment, I think it'll be a win-win for the entire state of West Virginia.
Although voter approval would be required, the constitutional amendment could clear the way for really major national concerts at the new Boy Scout Center under construction in Fayette County. The Senate passed 2 bills today. One extends controls over certain diesel-powered vehicles idling for long periods of time in urban areas. The other requires insurance companies to cover hearing aids for children under the age of 18 who need them. Marion County Senator Joe Menard sponsored that legislation.
Of course, it's about $1,400 allowance, that's per ear. So if you have both ears impaired, it'd be $2,800. And I think every 36 months, you'd be able to get a new hearing aid if needed.
And some health insurance plans just don't want to cover this.
Well, right now under this law, all health insurance plans will have to cover it except for PEIA. PEIA, of course, in a different section of the code. So the code that we're working in does not apply to PEIA, but it does all the other insurance companies.
The Senate took a break from its regular proceedings today to welcome to the floor the entire football team from Martinsburg High School. Majority Leader Senator John Unger, who once played football for the Martinsburg Bulldogs, sponsored the resolution recognizing the team for winning 2 consecutive state championships. For West Virginia Public Broadcasting, I'm Bob Brunner in Charleston.
In a moment, more about issues of interest to the state's teachers. First, here's a look at what's coming up in the Senate tomorrow. Among the bills up for passage in the Senate tomorrow, Senate Bill 496 to modify the Department of Environmental Protection's requirements to inventory emissions of greenhouse gases and eliminate unneeded provisions. It allows reporting under the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency's mandatory reporting rule to satisfy such reporting in West Virginia. Senate Bill 566 to authorize the Commissioner of Corrections to contract with nonprofit and charitable organizations for work release and inmate reentry services. The bill also allows circuit courts to directly place convicted defendants in such facilities. House Bill 4087 to extend the moratorium on the regular severance tax on timber until the additional workers' compensation debt reduction tax expires. House Bill 4415 to authorize a governing board to oversee the maintenance of an architecturally significant railroad station in Prince, West Virginia, which will serve passengers traveling to the new Boy Scouts of America Adventure Camp in Fayette County. And House Bill 4493 to make the week of December 7th a special Memorial Week. The bill directs the State Department of Education to develop a program to educate students about the contributions made by West Virginians in the United States military. Among the bills on second reading, Senate Bill 212 to make it a criminal offense to disrupt emergency communications by metal theft. The crime is a felony and carries a jail term of up to 10 years and a fine of up to $10,000 or both. Senate Bill 547 to permit and prohibit the expungement of certain criminal convictions. The bill prohibits the expungement of convictions involving violence, certain sexual offenses, sexually explicit conduct involving minors, child abuse, and offenses involving explosives. Senate Bill 596 to prohibit possession, distribution, display of, and production of child erotica. Senate Bill 606 to create a procedure for forfeiture of items related to child pornography arrests and other computer crimes and prosecutions. And Senate Bill 646 to require the State Board of Education to study issues concerning the General Educational Development or GED exam, including costs of administering the examinations and exploring optional pen and paper testing. In his State of the State address in January, Governor Tomlin noted several education issues. First, he touted his education audit conducted on the State Department of Education by an out-of-state firm. He said the recommendations could save the state $90 million a year. In that speech, he also spoke of his bill tying teacher evaluations to student performance. Here's Bob Brunner with a review of that issue.
A recently released year-long independent audit contains a wealth of criticisms and recommendations. Chief among them, an evaluation system for teachers and permitting local school systems more flexibility in dealing with local needs. The state's new Teacher of the Year is Robert Morris of Clay County, who was recently saluted by the governor and other key officials in ceremonies at the Capitol. Morris says he supports evaluation and feedback for all teachers.
It doesn't make any sense for somebody who may or may not know what it takes to teach in the classroom to be making those standards. However, I do feel that teachers ought to be evaluated. I think that if you go for a long period of time without ever having somebody to look at what you do and evaluate what you do and suggest ways to get better, then you tend to become complacent. I like the direction that we're going about evaluating teachers and those using a set of standards. And if you meet the standard, then your evaluation is good. If you don't, then we give you ways to get to meeting the standard. It's not punishment. It's not looked at as like, I'm going to get you or something like that. So I really feel like the evaluation system that we're moving to is an improvement over what we already have.
While there is some resistance to the idea, longtime State Board of Education member Priscilla Hayden says a pilot program to do just that is already underway.
I would think if we work together, the State Board and the governor and the legislature more closely, that we really could accomplish a lot. I'm pleased to say we have accomplished so much, particularly with our new superintendent. We are moving forward, but sometimes it takes 2 to 3 years to do something. I'll give you an example. We do have a teacher evaluation program that is now being in our schools, piloting it. We have 25 schools. This is a major breakthrough.
The new state school superintendent is treading carefully in responding to the audit, but says the system must keep the students' needs first.
So if we are to achieve our goals and if we are to improve public education, we have a team here that can do that.
The Teacher of the Year gets a brand new Toyota Prius hybrid from Toyota Manufacturing, West Virginia, and a $5,000 check from Highmark Blue Cross Blue Shield. Highmark President Fred Early says business is wise to invest in our schools.
If West Virginia is going to continue to be a vibrant place, a good place to live, have good jobs, it's going to have a good workforce to it, and having those young people trained as best as we can to be ready for those positions and those jobs are essential to the long-term success of the state. You know, West Virginia is where we live and work. We're committed to this state. That's the only place where we operate, and so it's important for us to do what we can to maintain West Virginia as best we can.
As Governor Tomblin looks on, Morris takes the key to the new car, the oversized check, and heads back to the classroom teaching agriculture and forestry. The current budget provides for a 1.5% adjustment in teachers' salaries, which are now ranked 48th in the nation. Both teachers' unions are requesting significantly more, but the Tomblin administration and the legislative leadership are determined to balance the budget with no new taxes. And that makes any major pay raise a long shot at best. For West Virginia Public Broadcasting, Bob Brunner in Charleston.
Our guest tonight served on the task force driving the pilot project on teacher evaluations and has been closely monitoring the governor's bill. Dale Lee is the president of the West Virginia Education Association. Mr. Lee, welcome. So glad you're here.
Thank you for having me.
The governor's teacher evaluation bill is on second reading in the House tomorrow, and no doubt you've been watching this very closely. Tell me about this pilot project. Mrs. Hayden of the State School Board indicated it's in 25 schools,
right.
Has been. And what has the pilot project done? How was it set up to do what?
Well, the State Department put a task force of predominantly teachers together and administrators to look at a pilot program to come up with a new evaluation system for an annual evaluation. It took over 18 months of constant meetings for us to come up with a pilot project. It's piloted in 25 schools this first year. It was designed so that at the end of the first year, we would come back to the task force, make the tweaks and adjustments that were needed to make, and we already see some things that we need to do. So some of it's more cumbersome than what we had anticipated. Then pilot it the second year in a couple schools in each county. And originally we were designed to come back at the end of that second year, tweak it again, and if we saw that we needed to pilot it a third year, do that. But the governor's bill then institutes it statewide in the third year.
Now, when you say a new evaluation system, were there evaluations previously to this teacher evaluation?
Sure, and it's a misconception to think that once you have over 5 years of teaching experience, you're never evaluated again. A teacher or an administrator, even under the current system we have now, can request an annual evaluation or an evaluation every other year as it is. It's just that this will absolutely provide for an evaluation of every teacher every year. For those in the first 3 years, it does 4 observations. The fifth and sixth year, the fourth and fifth year, it does a couple observations, and then from the 6th year on, you're doing kind of a self-evaluation with goal setting. And the other piece to this, it adds the student growth model in it. That 20% of this new evaluation system will be on student growth.
Okay. What do you mean by that?
And student growth means that there are goals that you will set in your classroom, and they have to be relevant, they have to be rigorous, and they have to have 2 data points so that you can see where the students were, and at the end of your quarter or year, whatever your data point is, see what progress they make and show that they made some improvement. And then a small part of that is the school-wide test score.
All right. So it was supposed to be that the pilot project would continue and then expand a little bit, but the governor is going to go ahead and put it statewide. Are you okay with that?
Actually, what he's done is followed the task force recommendation, and that next year it will be piloted in 2 schools in each county.
Okay.
We didn't necessarily say the third year would be a statewide implementation. His bill does that, but we believe in discussions both with the governor and the House and the Senate leadership that if we see there's additional tweaks that need to be made, because we have it on the books that there'll be an annual evaluation, if we need to make the adjustments and test it one more time, that we'll be allowed to do that.
Of the teachers in this pilot project who are your members, how did they like it?
Well, you know, anything new and different has some drawbacks at the very beginning, particularly in the very initial part. The technology wasn't going as smoothly as it should have been, but those have seemed to be taken care of. The problem right now is with the student growth models, because they're brand new, and coming up with some, and many teachers are coming up with growth models that are much too rigorous. And so they're making the adjustments that we need to be made, and the time consumption. One component of it is the collaboration time, and we have to remember once that comes statewide, you're going to have to provide collaboration time for teachers across the state, since that will be a part of this evaluation.
You think that implementing an evaluation would be a simple thing, but it's really not. There's a lot of, as you say, technical. If you're going to tie it to student achievement, it's a whole lot of technical. It's not as easy as just implementing an evaluation policy.
Because there's really no models out there that show you what a student growth model should really look like and actually enhances student achievement. And that's why the task force worked for 18 months on this and want to make sure that we get it right and we make the adjustments so that it fits what's best for West Virginia. West Virginia schools are much different than the schools in New York or Chicago or anywhere else, and we want to make sure that we come up with a system that fits our needs and our students' needs so that we can make an already good system even better.
And you believe the governor's bill does that?
I believe it has the opportunity to let the task force work run its course.
Have you been satisfied with your union's involvement in this bill?
Absolutely, it's one of the things that we strongly, when the task force first convened, we strongly encouraged the State Department to make it predominantly teachers, because they're the ones who are going to have to. They're the experts in public education.
That's what
we
Mr.
believe.
Morris, the Teacher of the Year, said.
Absolutely,
let teachers do it.
And teachers, what you find is teachers are more stringent upon themselves than anyone else.
Okay. Dale Lee, President of the West Virginia Education Association, thanks so much for the explanation. We appreciate it.
Oh, thank you.
And here's a look at what's coming up in the House tomorrow. Among the bills up for passage in the House tomorrow, Senate Bill 379 to authorize the State Nursing Board to designate programs in which nurses may be monitored while they pursue treatment and recovery for alcohol abuse, chemical dependency, or emotional illness. House Bill 2740, prohibiting homeowner associations from restricting the installation of solar energy systems on houses. House Bill 4028, to authorize the temporary suspension of certification of emergency medical service personnel or the license of an emergency medical service provider without a hearing or prior notice if there's probable cause there's a danger to public health or safety. House Bill 4037, to require licensing boards to consider military training, experience, and education toward qualification for professional or occupational licenses. House Bill 4530, allowing public utilities to sell bonds as a means of alternative financing to avoid consumer rate increases. Among the bills on second reading, House Bill 4236, Governor Tomlin's bill to phase in a new evaluation process for professional personnel and institute a comprehensive teacher mentoring system in West Virginia. House Bill 4322, to add coyote and fox to the list of species in which any color of artificial light is permitted for hunting at night. And House Bill 4424, to make a pilot project establishing emergency mental hygiene procedures permanent. The bill adds the word addiction to the code regarding mental hygiene procedures. And finally tonight, West Virginia's varied and colorful history was on display throughout the Capitol today as more than 50 groups celebrated their efforts to preserve our heritage. The annual History Day is sponsored by the West Virginia Division of Culture and History. You can meet women who riveted airplanes together during World War II. You can meet frontiersmen and women, colonial belles, Even George Washington was there. And you can see the fiddle made famous by the legendary Senator Robert C. Byrd. There are historic recreations and museums in more than 40 counties. Archivist Deborah Basham says interest is growing.
Well, this is the 16th year that we've done History Day at the Legislature, and I think each year it gets a little bit bigger and better. We're delighted with the turnout of the groups. People are really coming together, and it's a good chance for them to meet each other, share ideas, and exchange thoughts on how we can make the history of the state more important to its citizens.
Lawmakers are being urged to find more funds for historical projects as the state's 150th birthday celebration will occur next year. And this has been the Legislature Today. I'm Beth Voorhees. Thanks for joining us. Good night.